Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate. Just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
I live in New York, and it's hard to date in New York because, men, you fuckers, you guys are the worst. I swear, New York guys, I can't, because no one wants to commit. Everybody wants to be a fuckboy. Think of the ugliest guy you know. He's talking to 7 people right now, okay? Think of the ugliest guy you know. This guy has a basement face, and he's like, I'm not ready for a relationship right now. I can't believe people let you outside, okay? What are you talking about? This is why I'm excited for the draft to come back, because you guys have just had it way too easy for way too long. You think you're little kings of the castle. Guess again, sweetheart. Okay, this is what men need. They need structure, they need discipline, and they need perspective. Okay, they need to go to war, watch their best friend die. Come back, and be like, you know what? Dating Elle doesn't seem so bad.
Good morning. It's Friday, Fireman Friday, March the 21st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and 3,000 degrees. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. now the headlines for Friday, March the 21st. At least one child tests positive for fentanyl at a Victorville daycare. Newsom calls for rejecting Trump's order gutting education department. Mother accused in stabbing death of 11-year-old son at Santa Ana Hotel. London's Heathrow Airport closed due to power outage. One hospitalized after Pacoima home partially collapses in explosion. Dodger Stadium adding facial authentication tech for entry to ballpark. Layoffs nearly inevitable as LA faces budget shortfall of nearly $1 billion. Trump orders a plan to dismantle the education department. And those were the headlines for Friday, March the 21st. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the political corner.
We're back with another quick update on our efforts to cut wasteful spending and cut it quickly at the Department of Defense so we get the dollars to the things that the warfighters need. So today, I'm signing a memo directing the termination of over $580 million in DoD contracts and grants that do not match the priorities of this president or this department. In other words, they are not a good use of taxpayer dollars. Ultimately, that's who funds us, and we owe you transparency and making sure we're using it well. So here's quickly what we're canceling today. There's an HR software effort that was supposed to take a year and cost $36 million, but instead it's taken 8 years and is currently $280 million over budget, not delivering what it was supposed to. So that's 780% over budget. We're not doing that anymore. Number two, another batch of DoD grants, $360 million worth this time. Decarbonizing emissions from Navy ships, part of the Obama-Biden green agenda, that's $6 million. $5.2 million on something that would diversify and engage the Navy by engaging underrepresented BIPOC students and scholars. Another $9 million at a university to approach equitable AI and machine learning models. I need lethal machine learning models, not equitable machine learning models. And number three, in our ongoing effort to cut wasteful spending on external consulting services, $30 million in contracts with Gartner and McKinsey. It's IT, purchasing, unused licenses. So when you add it all up, $580 million in DoD contracts and grants, DOGE is helping us cut today. What does that bring our total number up? Total cuts, running total, $800 million in wasteful spending canceled over the first few weeks as DoD partners with DOGE here to make sure that our warfighters have what they need by cutting the waste, fraud, and abuse. Their work.
And that was the political corner. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the patriotic short.
Pilots and crew, black stop. Keep alert. Enemy flights at 10 o'clock high to 2 o'clock high. They're going after Cruikshank and Lee. Lee's going down. I see parachutes. 110's are now 5 o'clock high. Going left. Rockets incoming. Starboard. Holy shit, there's a hole in the wing. He's got it above the bit. Can he do it? Close. That's left the high lead. He's got it. Hey, a ball turn. Any shoot. I don't see anything.
And that was the patriotic short. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of motivation.
If the lion is the king of the jungle, how can he be the king of the jungle? If he's not the biggest, the elephant is probably one of the biggest. He can't be the fastest because that's a cheetah. He can't be the smartest. So he's not the biggest, the fastest, or the smartest. So how does a lion become the king of the jungle? His mentality. That's the only difference of a lion and an elephant. When a lion walks up and sees an elephant, he thinks lunch. The elephant thinks run. And it's all mentality. Because when a male lion walks up, he may be outnumbered by a pack of hyenas, but I'm king of my jungle because of my mentality.
What happens when you're a gazelle and you're not being pushed? You're not being prodded. You're not given a reward. Nobody's encouraging you. What happens when you're a gazelle and the lion's not chasing you anymore? You stop running. What happens when you're a lion? When you're a lion, it does not make a difference. You realize that if your family is going to eat, that if that pack of lions is to survive, then you gotta go hunt. A part of being a beast just ain't eating a gazelle. A part of being a beast is the hunt. It's the hunt that they're excited about. They like to see the gazelles run. Then boom, they take off. Because real lions like to hunt. They love the process just as much as they love the prize. And some of y'all just want to score. You don't like the process. You're not in love with the process. A true hunter's goal is not the prize. A true hunter's goal is to hunt. That's what they live for. They live to hunt. They don't just live to catch it. It's the whole process. When you are a true hunter, you don't go by time. You go by the gazelle. When you are a true hunter, you hunt until you get a gazelle, and you don't stop until you get one. And then you get another, and then you get another, and you get another. If you're going to do what you say you're going to do, be what you say you're going to be, you're going to have to lion me out. You a gazelle, you're going to come up short. You a gazelle, you're going to have an average experience. You a student, I need you in lion mode. You an entrepreneur, I need you in lion mode. You trying to lose weight, lion mode. You can't do nothing significant in gazelle mode. Nothing. Nothing impressive happens in gazelle mode. Nothing happens in run mode, give up mode, quit mode, scared mode, fearful mode. Nothing happens. Everything happens in lion mode like I'm coming to get you.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
Your career is not a life sentence. How disgraceful is the lawyer whose dying breath passes while at court at an advanced age, pleading for unknown litigants and still seeking the approval of ignorant spectators. Seneca on the Brevity of Life, 20.2. Every few years, a sad spectacle is played out in the news. An old millionaire, still lord of his business empire, is taken to court. Shareholders and family members go to court to argue that he is no longer mentally competent to make decisions, that the patriarch is not fit to run his own company and legal affairs. Because this powerful person refused to ever relinquish control or develop a succession plan, he is subjected to one of life's worst humiliations, the public exposure of his most private vulnerabilities. We must not get so wrapped up in our work that we think we're immune from the reality of aging and life. Who wants to be the person who can never let go? Is there so little meaning in your life that your only pursuit is work until you're eventually carted off in a coffin? Take pride in your work, but it is not all.
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Thank you. And now, The Exorcist.
But the elephant in the room is this. We have a problem. The people at the top just can't admit that this whole thing has been an unmitigated disaster for 60 years. Now, I'm not trying to criticize specific things. I'm just saying that the church is in a bad way and they just won't bring themselves to admit it. But the other part of the elephant, the trunk, when you feel different parts, you get a different sense of it, is that we have to accept the fact, part of the elephant in the room, is the fact that we have people in high places in the church running parts and aspects of the church who are evil.
In a perfect world,
And that was The Exorcist. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. The exponents of modern movements do not seek to convert you to their values. They haven't any, but to destroy yours. Nihilism and destruction are almost explicit goals of today's trends, and the horror is that these trends move on unopposed. What is the solution and the antidote? Its name is objectivism. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter Our Cultural Value Deprivation from the book The Voice of Reason. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Maria Bartiromo.
This was an act of domestic terrorism. Now, we as members of Congress take an oath to protect the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
When the threat that was metastasizing was the threat of white nationalist domestic terror, if you can't diagnose the threat, if you can't speak directly to the threat, you can't respond to the threat.
It seems as though white men invoking white supremacy and engaging in mass shootings are almost immune from being labeled domestic terrorists in their violence.
Meanwhile, Maria, these owners, the employees have been docked.
So I want to say the Democrat Party has been the party of domestic terrorism since 1861. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Maria and Varney and Company.
Welcome back. Time for the big buzz of of the morning. No more late nights and overtime to reach financial success. It could come from your sleep position. A new survey from Bed Slats finds the most common position among the top 10% of earners is the free fall position. This is where you lay on your stomach with your head to the side and arms wrapped around the pillow. Is that the way you sleep? Experts are warning this could come with extreme neck pain, by the way, okay? I don't know about this. I will tell you guys, I sleep on my back in the soldier position. It's worked for me, John.
Oh, my God, I do, too. This is great. I do the same thing. I sleep on my back because I have a certain furry child that wants to sleep on my legs. I have no choice, Maria.
No, that's so cute. Well, John, you're the outlier here. You sleep on your side.
Well, there's a good reason for that. I sleep on my right side because I can't hear in my left ear. So this way here, if my wife wants to talk to me at night, I don't have to listen to her.
Thank you, guys. Great show. Incredible show today and great week. Thank you to this esteemed panel. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us. I'll see you tonight on Marie Bartiromo's Wall Street and on Sunday. Ashley Webster's in for Stu this morning. Ashley, take it away on Varney and Company.
I will indeed. Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everybody. Indeed, I'm Ashley Webster in for Stu Varney today. Let's get right to it. Making good on her promise, Attorney General Pam Bondi is cracking down on people accused of attacking Tesla properties, charging 3 individuals with domestic terrorism. They now face up to 20 years behind bars, but Democrats remain silent. Not a word. A federal judge has issued yet another new deadline for the Department of Justice to hand over information about deportation flights to El Salvador last weekend. But the DOJ is doubling down, saying it's not required to share those details. And now President Trump is calling on the Supreme Court to intervene. The president, by the way, also signing an executive order to begin dismantling the Education Department with plans to work with Congress to shut it down completely. All right, let's take a look at your money. Look at these markets before they open in about half an hour from now. And as you can see, the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ all pointing just slightly lower. Let's take a look at the 10-year Treasury yield if we can. That also has been dropping, as well as the there you go. It's down 2.9 basis points. The yield at 2.20. That's nothing to get too excited about. Good for equities. The 2-year Treasury, let's take a look at where the 2-year is headed. Also moving lower, down more than 3 basis points at 3.93%. Okay, and Bitcoin. Never forget Bitcoin. I couldn't. It's down $700 at 83,000. Well under that, whatever it was, 106,000 it hit. 109,000 and change.
Day.
Thank you very much, Lauren Simonetti. Way off of that.
We'll never forget that.
On the show today, the latest Fox News polls reveal growing support for Donald Trump's policies, including banning biological men from competing in women's sports, making English the official language, and cracking down on illegal immigration. President Donald Trump also signing an executive order on Thursday aimed at immediately increasing American production of critical minerals like uranium, copper, and gold. And this is a remarkable story going on today. All flights at London Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, busiest in Europe, cancelled today after a fire knocked out power in the area. Apparently they had no backup. There's going to be questions asked. We've got a packed show ahead, as always. It is Friday, March the 21st, 2020.
And that, there you have it. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from it's Nietzsche. Is, let's see which book this is here. Whoops. The Will to Power. Nihilism is at our door. Whence comes this most gruesome of all guests? To begin with, it is a mistake to point to social evils, psychological degeneration, or even to corruption as a cause of nihilism. This is the most straightforward and most sympathetic age that ever was. Evil, whether spiritual, physical, or intellectual, is, in itself, quite unable to introduce nihilism, i.e., the absolute repudiation of worth, purpose, desirability. These evils allow of yet other and quite different explanations. But there is one very definite explanation of the phenomena. Nihilism harbors in the heart of Christian morals. And that was from Will to Power by Friedrich Nietzsche. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Generalists Wanted. J.B. Shirk wrote the following in The American Thinker, quote, "Of all the pernicious concepts infecting minds today, perhaps none is more harmful than the belief that only specialists can tackle complex problems. Strange as it might seem, specialization is a very recent human phenomenon. Smart and capable people in the past did not limit their studies to particular subjects or avoid novel ideas emerging in unfamiliar fields. Thinkers acquired and applied knowledge wherever they could. What does it say about our society that most artists, academics, writers, and reporters all believe and say the same things? What does it say about our universities that most professors are creatures of the social left, that speech codes are enforced, that safe spaces are monitored for protection, and that politically incorrect thoughts are denigrated? What does it say about our scientists that they defend their opinions with religious fervor and censor opposing points of view? What does it say about our white-collared professionals and government bureaucrats that they ridicule public dissent as disinformation or misinformation and justify their own policies as the products of unimpeachable expertise? All of these pathologies suggest that our society is riddled by tyranny and groupthink. Ours is a world where experts repeat falsehoods and regular people are expected to treat those falsehoods as magical truths. Obedience has displaced originality. Mimicry has supplanted imagination. To free ourselves, we must think for ourselves." This is how the author could have and should have written those paragraphs. I find the belief that only specialists can tackle complex problems pernicious and harmful. I notice that smart and capable people in the past did not limit their studies to particular subjects or avoid novel ideas emerging in unfamiliar fields. They sought accuracy everywhere. I oppose the artists, academics, writers, and reporters that all say the same things. I resist all universities and professors that enforce speech codes, monitor safe spaces, and denigrate politically incorrect thoughts. I rebut scientists that defend their opinions with religious fervor and censor opposing points of view. I defy white-collared professionals and government bureaucrats that ridicule dissent as disinformation or misinformation. I refuse to submit to our society of tyranny and groupthink. I refuse to repeat falsehoods and treat them as truth. I demand that originality replace obedience and imagination supplant mimicry. I will think for myself. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, 3,000 degrees.
13. When the second floor went bad, the flames nearly exploding and the smoke instantly shrouding everything in oily vapor, Captain Mike Coakley headed for the roof. It was a calculated risk. He knew going up meant fighting his way through the worst of the cloud, all that gas and dirty molecules rising on their own heat. But he also knew Worcester Cold Storage better than most men on the job. He'd been in it a number of times for routine inspections, always in the light, never under pressure, and he'd gotten lost. Like every other Worcester fireman, Coakley used to tell himself, "God, if that goes up, I hope I'm off duty." So much for hoping. He remembered the door from the stairs to the ground floor was tucked behind a short wall, that he could stumble past it, find himself at a dead end in the basement, maybe get lost in a maze down there. Moving the other way was a straight run to the open night sky and relatively fresh air. There was an escape route waiting too, Ladder 1's big aluminum stick rising up from the back of the truck. All things considered, up was a safer bet than down. Bert Davis, one of his men from Ladder 1, followed him, the two of them humping double time through the darkness. Immediately before the bulkhead at the roof, Bert felt a sharp whack against the top of his forehead. A metal pipe hung low across the stairwell. He blinked the stars out of his eyes, ducked, bounded up into clear air. Neither man liked the view from the top. The vent just beyond the firewall, the skylight Paul and Jerry had smashed out, was a volcano. Orange flames shooting up through it, blowing 30 feet into the air, embers spinning away like bottle rockets, smoke braided through the strands of fire. Closer to them, the roof was bubbling, the tar starting to melt, to boil. There was too much heat below, so much that it couldn't all escape through the huge hole Paul and Jerry had bashed out above the elevator shaft, 15 feet to a side, 225 feet square. The warehouse had become an enormous blast furnace. The flames on the second floor were drawing great drafts of oxygen through the loading dock doors, gorging on air, then exhaling through the elevator shaft, which was functioning as a massive chimney. Attacking the fire, by the numbers, a textbook operation, appeared to have only antagonized it. It was as if the building had set a booby trap, lured the men in, then erupted. Then Coakley felt a chill, despite the sizzling atmosphere. Paul on the radio.
We're lost, Dave. You gotta send a rescue team up here for us.
Coakley shuddered, felt his sweat go clammy. He knew Paul and Jerry were in peril, could hear it in their voices. He also knew where they were, give or take a couple dozen yards. 15 minutes earlier, after the roof had been vented and the hoses were positioned around the flames, Coakley had stood with Paul and Jerry on the 5th floor landing. Coakley and Bert were going to help man the hoses. "You want to come down?" he'd asked the rescue guys. "Nah," Paul told him. "We'll finish this floor, then we'll be down." He heard Paul again.
"Second floor down from the roof. 2 floors down, I think."
That meant they'd never finished the 5th floor. Coakley considered how much time had passed, mapped the building in his head from memory. Best guess they'd crossed through the firewall, had found the single opening between the two halves of the warehouse, then gotten turned around in the labyrinth on the far side. In clear light, it might take a man 2 minutes to cover that same ground, find them, get them a fresh bottle of air. Groping through a coal-black cloud on all fours would take 5 minutes, and then only if a man was guided by blind luck. Realistically, it was far longer, if it was even possible. Coakley did more math. Paul and Jerry had 1 tank between them, buddy-breathing their last precious wisps of air. Their lives were being measured in minutes. How many? 2? 4? The exact number didn't matter. Paul and Jerry would be dead before anyone got to them. Coakley was sure of that. They could be recovered, but not rescued. He leveled his stare at Bert, locked eyes with him. A Bible verse crept into his thoughts, something from Matthew. It was hard to remember. No, John. Definitely John, chapter 15. "A greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his brothers." Something like that. It had been a noble abstract in Sunday school. On the roof, in the steam and the soot and the ferocious crackling, it was an obligation. Paul had been in the first drill class Coakley had taught, and one of the things he was supposed to have learned, that Paul did learn, was to never leave a man stranded. "We gotta go get him," he told Bert. "Let's go." It was an order. Bert didn't hear it as one, because Bert didn't need to be told to go save his friends. But Coakley meant it as one, an officer telling a subordinate what to do, relieving Bert of accountability. It was easier that way. In his mind, Coakley assumed responsibility for Bert's life. Bert nodded, the quick, firm tilt of the chin that men do when they are very serious. They went back to the bulkhead, snapped their masks into place, and stepped into the darkness. They felt their way down 1 set of stairs, then a second flight. Coakley felt for the door into the 5th floor, pushed it open, then dropped to his knees. Bert was immediately behind him, one gloved hand holding tight to Coakley's coat. They crawled inside the 5th floor, trying to move in a straight line, aiming for the firewall on the far side. Coakley felt for a wall, something to keep his bearings. His air tank had already been tapped, part of it already inhaled. They'd have only about 10 minutes inside, and only if they controlled their breathing, kept it steady. Coakley felt something solid to his right. He swept his hand up, then down, moved it in a wide circle. A wall. He scooted forward, keeping in contact with the flat surface on his right. After a minute or so, he came to an inside corner. He shuffled left, keeping the wall to his right. More crawling. Another corner. Then a third, and a fourth. Coakley's throat tightened. I'm in a fucking room. But he hadn't felt a door. A four-sided room had to have a door. They'd gotten in. There had to be a way out. He kept moving, his knees scraping faster over the same stretch of warehouse floor he'd been around once. 4 more corners. Coakley shifted his arm higher, up where the door handle should be. He remembered the iron rings lay flush, nestled in pockets, but maybe he could feel one in the dark. 4 more corners. Still no door. His heart raced. "Bert!" he yelled over his shoulder. "We're going to die in here!" He crawled forward, quelled the panic rising inside. He said the same words to himself, believed them. "I'm going to fucking die. I'm going to die for a piece of shit building, trying to save a guy who's already dead. I'm going to fucking die in here." Logic took him the next step. "I've killed Bert. I fucking killed Bert." His low air alarm hadn't gone off yet. There was still time. He'd given Bert an order. Forget laying down his own life. His duty, his immediate and only obligation, was to get his man out alive. Behind him, Bert was thinking the same thing. He had to save his captain. They had to save each other. They kept moving, knowing that the stop was to concede defeat, surrender to the building. Coakley focused on the time. How long had they been in there? He wasn't sure. His air had to be running low. He swept his hand forward along the wall. His fingers jabbed a hard ridge. He reached for it with both gloves, slid all 10 fingers against it. He felt a thin lip of metal. The door. A draft, a gust of heat, or a hard puff of smoke must have nudged it, pushed it in just far enough to be felt by a blind man. His heart pounded harder. 2 beats, 3 beats, 12. Coakley rose up on his knees and pulled open the door, felt to make sure Bert was still with him, then edged through it. He paused, listened. The sounds, clomping boots, whining saws, clanking tools, were louder to the left. He turned, scuttled as quickly as his knees would move, felt another door, then the steel treads of the stairs. With Bert still behind him, he bolted down the stairs, his mask buzzing against his face as he cleared the final steps. Bob Mansfield followed Robert A. up from the ground floor a minute after Paul's call for help. Both of them had a fresh bottle of air, but neither trusted the supply to hold out. They were breathing hard from hiking through black steam, kicking the risers of each step to find their way to the 4th floor. They dropped to their knees and began to crawl. They didn't know if they were on the right floor, if they were crawling toward Paul and Jerry, or beneath them. But maybe Paul and Jerry didn't know precisely where they were either. Other men were already searching the 5th floor. If there was a chance Paul and Jerry had made it down to the 4th, Robert A. and Bob weren't going to risk leaving them there. The heat was ferocious, roiling the smoke, making it seem like the atmosphere was alive, angry, a predator smothering its prey. It wrapped around their masks, obliterated their vision, took away shadow and light. But they could feel it, moving with an unnatural velocity, swirls and eddies twisting around their arms and legs and chests as they inched forward, a physical presence that pushed back, pressed on them. And they could feel each other, Bob on Robert A.'s right shoulder maintaining contact with one hand, holding a Halligan in the other. Robert A. had the only radio between them, and the background noise overwhelmed their voices unless they yelled in each other's ears. If they lost touch for more than a moment, they would lose each other. It was difficult to know how far they'd gone, but Bob memorized the turns. He'd practiced how to maintain his bearings in utter darkness on the underwater rescue team. In a blackwater dive, men floated blind, losing sensory perception in 3 dimensions, side to side and front to back and up and down. At least in a fire, he didn't have to worry about up and down, only the level movements. So far, he and Robert A. had made 3 lefts, tracing a giant U-shaped path into the warehouse. That's what it seemed like, anyway. Were they in 50 feet? 100? And how much air did they have left? It was impossible to be certain. Robert A. wasn't taking chances. With 2 lives on the line, he wouldn't help anyone by getting himself lost. "We're far enough in," he said after the 3rd left. "Let's get out of here, because if we don't get out now, we're not getting out." "All right," Bob said. He was relieved. The danger, the very real risk of dying, was outweighing the possibility of finding Paul and Jerry on the 4th floor. He felt Robert A. scoot forward and to the right. Hey, wrong way, he screamed. "You're going the wrong way. It's this way." He tugged Robert A.'s sleeve to the back and right, the reverse of the turns Bob remembered making. "No, it's not," Robert A. shouted back. "It's this way." He scooted forward again. Bob's hand slipped away. He reached for Robert A., felt nothing but smoke. Just a few feet away, Robert A. was groping for Bob. He turned for him, reached again. Nothing. They were both spinning, swinging their hands, desperate to reconnect. They called for each other, but the noise, the rush of hot air, and the grumble of flames washed away their voices, grabbed them in the short gap between the two men, carried them away. Bob froze. His mind raced. Two instincts, survival and duty, colliding, spinning around each other. Firemen didn't leave anyone alone in an inferno. Men lived because other men never left them alone to die. He couldn't leave Robert A., but he couldn't find him either. Maybe Robert A. had switched directions, moved back the way Bob told him to go. Or maybe he crawled farther into the warehouse, made another turn, snaked into a corner. Bob didn't know. Couldn't know. If he went after him, he'd just be guessing, and it would probably kill him. He decided not to die. If he got out, got more air, he could come back. He could tell other men where to look, get someone to raise Robert A. on his radio, talk him back to the door. Nausea churned in his stomach as he lurched back and to the right, the way he remembered. Bob crawled a few feet, then made the first right turn. He felt something hard and solid rise up in front of him. A wall. He spread out his hands, reached ahead. Another wall coming into the first and forming a corner. "Shit," he whispered. He didn't remember any corners. It must be a room, he thought. But he shouldn't be in it. Didn't know how he'd gotten there. He realized he'd made a mistake. Maybe a fatal one. Panic tickled his brainstem. He squeezed his eyes shut, shook his head, concentrated, forced his nerves to steady themselves. He'd been through this before, thinking he would die, trapped in a flaming cellar, 3 minutes of air in his tank, the hose that led out through a maze of boxes and shelves hidden under rubble and water. He'd panicked then, started to hyperventilate, convinced he didn't have enough oxygen to escape. "You dumb shit," he'd muttered next. "You keep breathing like that and you're definitely not getting out." Self-control had saved his life. This was the same thing, only worse. He stopped moving, stayed in one spot, listening, hoping to key in on a sound that would lead him out. For a long moment, there was only the snarl of the fire. But then, a sputter, the rapid pop-pop-pop of an engine jerking to life. He recognized it as a K-12, a heavy-duty saw that can tear through most anything. There had to be a fireman holding it. That had to be the way out. Bob crawled toward the sound, feeling the wall as he went. Above him, he felt a small hole, just big enough to stick his head through. He stood up and peered into the black. The smoke seemed thinner, still black and oily, but not quite as dense, breaking and fading in random places. A light shone through, disappeared behind another puff, reappeared. A searchlight, attached to one of the big aerial scopes. It had to be coming through one of the stairwell windows. Safety was only a dozen yards away. He scurried along the wall, felt another corner, turned right. His hand hit a short ledge. A step, the step to the landing. He lurched to his feet, swept his leg forward, his brain telling his body to run, sprint to the ground, to fresh air. He froze again. He couldn't leave. He'd been less wrong than Robert A., probably, anyway. If the captain was still inside, Bob had to get him out. He took a step back into the 4th floor, followed the wall until he came to a metal door. Then he swung at it with the Halligan, hit the steel as hard as he could. Once, twice, 3 times, big booms that rolled into the smoke. He stopped, listened. "Keep doing that!" It was Robert A.'s voice, faint and muffled, but not far. Then it came again, louder, as if the captain had pulled off his mask, removed one barrier between his mouth and Bob's ears. "Keep doing that!" Bob swung again, the Halligan light in his hands, adrenaline stoking his muscles and fear pumping out more adrenaline. He kept a steady beat, his pounding heart doubling for a metronome. The smoke rushed past him, a violent upward draft. He stood alone in the dark, banging and hoping for a minute or maybe 3, each one dragging on for an hour. He felt something brush against his leg. Then Robert A. was on his feet, reaching for him, pushing at him, urging him down the stairs. Mike McNamee paced at the bottom of the stairwell. 2 minutes had passed since Paul Brotherton's last transmission. He'd never heard a man sound so desperate. Never expected that when he did, it would be Paul. "We have no air. Please." Mike keyed his radio. He had to race Paul and Jerry, convince himself they were still alive, that they could still be found. He remembered their alarms, wondered if they'd sounded. Every fireman carried a small device attached to his coat called a pass alarm, which stood for a personal alert safety system. If a man remained motionless for 30 seconds, either overcome by smoke or trapped by debris, the alarm automatically sounded a piercing tone. There was also a panic button that could be pushed at will, setting off an auditory beacon for rescuers to home in on. "Paul Brotherton, Rescue 1, Mike barked into his radio. "Paul Brotherton, activate your pass system. Activate your pass system so we can hear you. Activate your emergency alarm." No answer. Mike ran outside, scanned the building again, desperate for a hint, anything. A minute passed before he heard his call sign on the radio.
"Command to Chief McNamee."
It was Jack Fenton, the deputy chief.
"Have you got the location of the men?"
"We have ladder 1, ladder 2, and engine 3 looking," Mike answered. Another 30 seconds ticked by. Still no answer from Paul or Jerry. Mike punched his talk button again.
"Command to Paul Brotherton. Command to Jerry Lucy. Activate your pass emergency."
Jerry answered.
"They are activated."
Thank God, Mike thought. He had Coakley and his men on the roof, and Tom Spencer, Sully, and their men working their way up the stairs.
"Ladder 1, ladder 2, engine 3, he said into his microphone. "They have activated their pass alarms up there."
Maybe they'd caught a break. The sound of a pass alarm could penetrate lead-dense smoke, cut through blackness that smothered the brightest lights, reflected all the photons back upon themselves. If his men could hear Paul and Jerry, Mike knew they could crawl to them, get a fresh tank snapped onto their masks, bring them out alive. The actual fire raging on the second floor was still basically contained. It was worsening, growing more vicious with each passing minute, but it hadn't spread much beyond the old office area. And a fourth alarm had been struck 3 minutes earlier. 2 more engines and a ladder were only blocks away. They were all undermanned, only 3 men on each truck, but any fresh set of legs and lungs would help. For the next 2 minutes, Mike counted heads, coordinated men with positions, made sure everyone was accounted for. Tom Spencer and Tim Jackson were on the 5th floor. Sully was working his way up to the 4th floor. He had 4 good pairs of ears listening for Paul and Jerry. There was still time, though precious little of it. At 6:57, he heard Sully's voice on the radio. Mike had sent him up to the 3rd floor with Mark Fleming. From the doorway, down on his belly, Sully could see into the warehouse beneath a bank of smoke that hung a foot above the floor. He'd crept in, Mark trailing him, both of them lugging extra air tanks for Paul and Jerry. Conditions worsened by the minute, the smoke dropping, heat rising. They pressed into the miasma, inching all the way to the firewall on the far side.
"They're not in here," he told Mark. "We gotta go up."
They found their way back to the stairwell and started climbing, pausing on the landings of each floor to listen for the squeal of an alarm.
"Engine 3 to command," Sully said. "Engine 3 to command."
Jack Fenton answered.
"Command." "Chief, we made it all the way to the top, and we hear no alarms on this side of the building." "Engine 3, if you can't reach them..."
A burst of static.
"Get the hell out of there."
Mike's stomach turned to lead. Paul and Jerry must have been buried somewhere deep inside, behind the walls layered with cork and polystyrene, materials thick enough to mute the whine of their pass alarms. He stopped tracking time. The heat of a firefight melts seconds into minutes and minutes into seconds, all of it lost in a blur. But he knew he was running out of it. He returned to the base of the stairs, watching his men, keeping track of them. A pass alarm for Engine 6 sounded, but it was a malfunction. Captain Arthur Shepard and his men were all present and accounted for. Mike called for more ambulances, made sure enough emergency medical technicians were standing by for men who'd surely be racked by carbon monoxide. Fire alarm told him 6 ambulances were waiting. George Zinkas, Mike's aide, was monitoring the battle against the fire, keeping Mike briefed on the battle fatigue. At 7:02, he told Mike they needed more men.
We could use a fresh crew over here,
he said from the seaside stairs.
Engine 7 just came down. We are at the other stairway.
Okay, Mike said. We got him here.
Have them follow that 2.5 on the first floor all the way around to us.
Then Fenton was calling him again.
Command to Interior, Chief McNamee.
Go ahead, Command.
Do you need any additional lines in there?
A brief pause. Say that again?
Do you need any additional lines in there?
Negative. We have enough lines. The focus right now is on the search.
10-4. I got men out here now. You want any additional help or need relief up?
Mike cut him off. Fresh crews with masks. We're going to rotate people in.
Repeat that message.
Too late. Tommy Spencer was calling Mike on the radio. Stand by, Command, Mike told Fenton. Ladder 2, repeat your message?
Chief,
Tom said.
Are all the people accounted for out of the building? Ladder 2 and Engine 3 are on the 5th floor, still searching.
Okay.
Are they accounted for?
The words were lost in the cacophony of the fire, drowned out by flames and saws and hoses and static. And Mike was distracted by other tasks. The men fighting the fire needed to be relieved. He steered a team from Engine 8 through the first floor toward the C stairs, radioed George that relief was on the way. Paul Brosnahan, on the other hand, was trying to locate his lieutenant. He'd been dispatched to rip the plywood out of the stairwell windows, open more holes so the smoke could cough out into the open air. Doug Army, one of Sully's men, had peeled off to help. With that task done, he wanted to find Tom Spencer. He called him twice before he got an answer.
Ladder 2, go ahead.
Tommy, did you come up the stairway 4 flights?
We came up the stairwell,
Tom said.
We're on the 5th floor.
What is your location on the 5th floor?
Good question.
Repeat, Brosnahan said.
We're doing a sweep.
Are you near the front side of the building or the rear?
I believe that we are in the front part of the building.
Okay, Brosnahan said. I've got myself and firefighter Army. It was 7:05. Paul Brotherton and Jerry Lucy had been lost for almost 20 minutes, buddy breathing for 15. At the bottom of the stairs, Mike was entering a desperate phase. He was still calm, detached, his emotions stripped away from his technical duties. But he knew only a miracle, a fortuitous air pocket, an obscured window, would allow Paul and Jerry to still be breathing, still be alive. Yet it was difficult to monitor the search. The men who tromped down the stairs briefed him on the conditions above, bad and getting worse, but there were others, more than a dozen of them, scattered throughout the warehouse. The only way to keep track of all of them, to gather their field reports, was over the radio. And he couldn't hear the damn thing. Saws screeched through wood and metal, hoses gushed, fire hissed like a herd of dragons. Stop with the saw, he snapped into the radio. We can't hear the radio transmissions. Stop with that saw. Sully was finally coming down the stairs, emerging from the fog like a dirty wraith. He told Mike how hot it was, how dark, how he couldn't hear any pass alarms, couldn't stay any longer in the heat and the smoke. Then Fenton was back on the radio. Go ahead, Mike said.
Do you need relief for Engine 3 and Ladder 2?
Engine 3 is already exiting. He was looking at Sully, knew it was true. Tom Spencer and Tim Jackson were still 5 floors up. At 8 minutes past 7, Spencer pressed his talk button.
Ladder 2 to command.
Fenton answered.
Command, go ahead, Ladder 2. Chief, get a company up the stairwell to the 5th floor,
Tom said.
We can't locate the stairwell. Or give us some sign as to which way to go. We are running low on air and want to get out of...
Transmission was cut off. For 3.5 minutes, an agonizingly long time in 300-degree darkness with a preciously limited supply of oxygen, the airwaves were cluttered, either with open microphones, guys hitting their buttons by mistake or at the same time as someone else, or chatter about where to put another hose. Tom Spencer finally held his button, raised his voice, demanded attention.
Ladder 2 to command.
Command, Fenton said. Go ahead.
Send somebody up the stairwell to the 5th floor. Stand in the doorway and start singing.
Repeat that message? Mike patched in. Slow it down a little.
Get somebody up in the stairwell to the 5th floor,
Tom said again. He was calm, almost serene, as if he knew fear was an extraneous emotion, something that could only distract him, blur his concentration, sap his strength.
Have them stand in the opening and yell. We can't find the door to the stairs.
Fenton still couldn't hear it.
Repeat the message,
he said.
We can't understand it. Repeat the message clearly.
Sully jumped in. Sully had good ears and a fresh bottle of air.
Engine 3 has the message, Chief. We're going to the 5th floor to the stairway to lead them.
It was 7:13. Sully stumbled up the stairs, feeling his way through the murk. When he'd counted 5 floors, he stopped, stood stone still, closed his eyes, because he always listened better that way. He strained to catch the faintest sound, the shuffle of knees against concrete, or the shriek of a pass alarm, or the static cackle of a radio. No sound. So he yelled, stretched his lungs, forced bottled air over his vocal cords until he thought they might rupture.
This way! This way!
He banged on the railing with his axe, making noises he hoped would carry through the din of the fire. Then he closed his eyes again, listened some more. Nothing rose above the awful monotony of flames. Tom Spencer and Tim Jackson were halfway across the building, closer to the firewall than the stairwell. The racket Sully made was swallowed in the distance between the two men, devoured by the din of the fire, absorbed by the smoldering insulation in the thick walls. Tom listened, though, strained to hear a ping or a yell. For 3 minutes he waited in the dark, soaked with sweat, dizzy from the heat and his own shallow breathing. He heard nothing but the roar of an inferno. 56 seconds after 7:15, Tom spoke into his radio.
Ladder 2 to command, he said. We're done.
The transmission was cut off, another radio squelching it. But Tom's voice had still been calm, level, maybe resigned. And the words were so soft that no one even heard them above the chaos.
And that was chapter 13 of 3,000 Degrees, the true story of a deadly fire and the men who fought it, by Sean Flynn. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.